This broadcast is the property of Codependents Anonymous. Reproduction without written permission from Codependents Anonymous is not permitted.
Okay, welcome to the sponsorship workshop, and we're going to have our introductory slide here shortly. Sponsorship workshop, Joy in the Journey, encouraging sponsors and sponsees, February 10, 2024. Welcome everyone. We have 300 participants, and we're excited and glad that you'll be here. Sponsorship is a rewarding way to work step 12. Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. We tried to carry this message to other codependents and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Sponsorship is a useful tool for sponsors and sponsees in a lifetime of gradual and loving recovery.
Hi, welcome everyone. So I just want to quickly point out we're having interpretation, and there is a globe in your tray that looks like on the slide here, or more, with 3 dots. And it says interpretation, and it would say that in your language. So click on that, and it will pop up a window. Although we have all these languages listed here, English, Russian, Spanish, Arabic, Persian, and even French is with us today. Spanish is a bit of an issue, so I'm going to be working on that. So there is a delay. And if somebody wants to write that in Spanish in the chat, I'd really appreciate that. And we'll let you know when it's activated. And the other part, so that you can hear the language that you want clearly, is mute original audio. So that would be in your more or globe as well. And we have closed captioning today. It will remain in English. It is not user dependent. So if I'm French and so note we're using English because there is, well, maybe for now, Spanish might be the right thing. Let's use Spanish for now and we will move it to English when we get this resolved. Thank you very much. For now, Spanish is the go-to word, but we're going to use closed captioning as well. Yes, there is a transcript, as mentioned, some people may have heard, and it is found, I think it could be in the same place, in your more button. I thought it was in your little hat of your chat, but I don't see that today. And it's there. So it's usually on the sidebar, it's in full view, and it's auto-generated in English only. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can write them in your own language. Somebody from of these languages will try and address it, or myself in Google Translate, and have a good morning and a good afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Before we go to the next slide, David, I want to address this issue of recording. So the speakers will be recorded. Once we get into the personal sharing that you would do, sharing your experience, strength, and hope, that part will not be recorded. So the recording will only be for the speakers. Thank you. Next. So welcome to Joy in the Journey. And here's what we're going to do from 11 to 11:15, opening, serenity prayer, preamble, welcome, steps, traditions, introduction, and the CoDA recovery prayer. And we have 6 speakers: Dan, Jillian, Nikki, Susan, Nathan, and Carol. And Michael W. From Australia on the first 14 days. Then 12:35 to 12:50, we have a break, and then we'll move into from 12:50 to 2 o'clock, sharing experience, strength, and hope. Sponsors and sponsees will have 3 minutes to share. Getting near the close with the 12 promises and the wrap up. And then James will talk a bit about H&I. Hospitals, institutions, sponsorship, and then at the end, I can't see the slide there, Jane, but 3 to 3:30, then 2:30 to 3:30 is the final wrap up. Okay, next slide. Good morning. My name is JG, and I am codependent. Welcome to the 2003 World CoDA Outreach Sponsorship Workshop. I will be your meeting leader today. This is a meeting workshop and meeting open to all codependents who still suffer. Let's open with a moment of silence, followed by the long version of the Serenity Prayer. And if we could read the Serenity Prayer in unison, please.
1 minute for that. I need to allow people to unmute. Okay.
Okay, in unison, the Serenity Prayer long version. God,
God, grant me the serenity to see that things cannot change,
to change the things that things I can't
to know the difference,
patience with the changes that take time,
all that I have,
all that I
again, one day at a time.
One day at a time. Try again. Amen. At a time. Amen.
300 people. Okay. Susan H., would you read the preamble for us, please?
Needs to put her hand up, please.
Hi, Susan, Codependent. I just keep getting this thing in my face here. Oh, Codependents Anonymous is a fellowship of people whose common purpose is to develop healthy relationships. The only requirement for membership is a desire for healthy and loving relationships. We gather together to support and share with each other in a journey of self-discovery, learning to love the self. Living the program allows each of us to become increasingly honest with ourselves about our personal histories and our own codependent behaviors. We rely upon the 12 steps and 12 traditions for knowledge and wisdom. These are the principles of our program and guides to developing honest and fulfilling relationships with ourselves and others. In CoDA, we each learn to build a bridge to a higher power of our own understanding, and we allow others the same privilege. This renewal process is a gift of healing for us. By actively working the program of Codependents Anonymous, we can each realize a new joy, acceptance, and serenity in our lives.
Thank you.
in French, right?
Yeah, sure.
All right. L'accueil des codépendants anonymes. Bienvenue à Codépendants Anonymes, un programme de rétablissement de la codépendance où chacun de nous peut partager son expérience, sa force et son espoir dans nos efforts pour trouver la liberté là où il y a eu servitude et la paix où il y a eu des bouleversements dans nos relations avec les autres et avec nous-mêmes. La plupart d'entre nous avons cherché des moyens pour résoudre les dilemmes issus de conflits de nos relations et dans notre enfance. Beaucoup d'entre nous avons grandi dans des familles touchées par la dépendance et certains dans des familles qui ne l'étaient pas. En tout cas, chacun de nous a décelé que la codépendance est un comportement compulsif, profondément enraciné dans sa vie et issu de nos familles ou autres systèmes dysfonctionnels, qu'ils le soient modérément ou sévèrement. Nous avons tous ressenti, chacun à notre façon, et tout au long de notre existence, le traumatisme douloureux causé par ce vide dans notre enfance et dans nos relations. Nous avons tenté d'utiliser les autres, nos partenaires, nos amis et même nos enfants, comme uniques pourvoyeurs d'identité, de valeur et de bien-être, et aussi pour essayer de combler les pertes affectives de notre enfance. Nos parcours peuvent être marqués par d'autres dépendances que nous avons parfois utilisées pour gérer notre codépendance. Nous avons tous appris à survivre à la vie, mais chez CoDA, nous apprenons à vivre la vie. En impliquant les 12 étapes et les principes de CoDA dans notre vie quotidienne et dans nos relations, passées et présentes, nous pouvons nous libérer de notre mode de vie autodestructeur. C'est un processus de croissance personnelle. Chacun de nous grandit à son rythme, continuellement, en restant ouvert à la volonté de Dieu, un jour à la fois. Nos partages sont un moyen de nous identifier les uns aux autres et nous aident à défaire les liens affectifs de notre passé ainsi que les comportements compulsifs de contrôle de notre présent. Quel que soit le degré de traumatisme du passé ou de malheur ressenti aujourd'hui, le programme des codépendants anonymes offre de l'espoir pour des jours meilleurs. Vous n'aurez plus à dépendre des autres comme puissance supérieure à vous-même. Puissiez-vous plutôt trouver ici une nouvelle force intérieure pour vivre comme Dieu l'a voulu pour vous, libre et précieux.
Okay, thank you, Nana. The steps, Henry.
Thank you so much, Jay, for your service.
Thank
Would
you.
you like me to read it in English or in Spanish? I can read both.
Your choice.
I'll read it in Spanish. Los 12 pasos de codependientes anónimos. I'm Henry, recovering codependent for life. Número uno, admitimos que éramos impotentes ante otros y que nuestra vida se había vuelto ingobernable. 2, llegamos al convencimiento de que un poder superior podría restaurar nuestro sano juicio. 3, decidimos poner nuestra voluntad y nuestra vida al cuidado de Dios, como cada uno entendemos a Dios. 4, sin miedo, hicimos un minucioso inventario moral de nosotros mismos. 5, admitimos ante Dios, ante nosotros mismos y ante otro ser humano, la naturaleza exacta de todos nuestros errores. 6, estuvimos enteramente dispuestos a dejar que Dios nos liberase de todos nuestros defectos de carácter. 7, humildemente le pedimos a Dios que nos libere de nuestros defectos. 8, hicimos una lista de todas aquellas personas a quienes habíamos ofendido y estuvimos dispuestos a reparar el daño que les causamos. 9, reparamos directamente a cuantos nos fue posible el daño causado, excepto cuando el hacerlo implicaba perjuicio para ellos o para otros. 10, continuamos haciendo nuestro inventario personal y cuando nos equivocábamos lo admitíamos inmediatamente. 11, buscamos a través de la oración y de la meditación mejorar nuestro contacto consciente con Dios, tal como nosotros lo concebimos, pidiéndole solamente nos dejase conocer su voluntad para con nosotros y nos diese la fortaleza para cumplirla. Y 12, habiendo obtenido un despertar espiritual como resultado de estos pasos, tratamos de llevar el mensaje a otros codependientes y de practicar estos principios en todos nuestros asuntos. Thank you for letting me read.
My name is Pedro and I'm a codependent. I will read in Portuguese. As 12 tradições de codependentes anónimos. Primeira, o nosso bem-estar comum deve estar em primeiro lugar. A recuperação pessoal depende da unidade da CoDA. Segunda, para o propósito do nosso grupo existe uma única autoridade final. Um poder superior amoroso, tal como ele se manifesta na nossa consciência de grupo. Os nossos líderes são simplesmente servidores de confiança. Eles não governam. Terceira, o único requisito para ser membro de CoDA é o desejo de desenvolver relações saudáveis e de amor. Quarta, que cada grupo deverá manter-se autónomo, excepto em assuntos que afetem outros grupos ou CoDA como um todo. Quinta, cada grupo tem apenas um propósito primordial, levar a sua mensagem a outros codependentes que ainda sofrem. Sexta, um grupo de CoDA nunca deverá endossar, financiar ou emprestar o nome de CoDA a nenhuma entidade, afim ou empreendimento exterior para evitar que problemas de dinheiro, propriedade e prestígio nos afastem do nosso propósito espiritual. Sétima, um grupo de CoDA deve ser completamente autossuficiente, declinando contribuições de fora. Oitava, CoDA deve manter-se sempre não profissional, mas os nossos centros de serviço podem empregar pessoal especializado. Nona, CoDA como tal nunca deverá organizar-se, mas podemos criar órgãos de serviço ou comissões diretamente responsáveis perante aqueles que servem. Décima, CoDA não tem opinião sobre assuntos alheios à comunidade. Portanto, o nome de CoDA nunca deverá aparecer em controvérsias públicas. 11ª, a nossa política de relações públicas baseia-se na atração e não na promoção. Precisamos de manter sempre o anonimato pessoal na imprensa, na rádio e em filmes. 12ª, o anonimato é o alicerce espiritual de todas as nossas tradições, lembrando-nos sempre de colocar os princípios acima das personalidades. Obrigado.
I think Jay's got a lot of problems, David. Maybe we ought to just introduce the first speaker and give him time to work that out.
James, is your language in interpretation? You need to set your language to English, or you may not hear Jay. And Dan is our first speaker. I'm not hearing Dan.
He's muted.
He should be able to unmute himself. I don't know.
There you go. He's got it. I hear you, Dan.
Welcome, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I'm Dan, and I'm a recovering codependent. The first note I have here on my script is to remain slow, because I have a tendency to really pick up speed, and I kind of get passionate with what I need to share. And this is somewhat, and even in my encounters with my sponsees. So that's how I'd like to approach my share right now, is the kind of stuff that I would want to share with sponsees or co-sponsors. A while ago, I felt a spiritual awakening of sorts. I got goosebumps just hearing the readings in the various languages. And it's a similar feeling I get when I meet with each of my sponsees. Maybe not the goosebumps, but there's a connection that's being made between myself and the sponsee, the other. And I ask the sponsee, usually at the first encounter, is to prepare in that way to connect, for him or her to connect with their higher power, so that when we meet, there's four of us present: the sponsor, the sponsee, and each our higher power. Because the whole thing is about, it's a spiritual program. So our encounter is a spiritual encounter. And it's necessary for me, on my part, to be myself, to be aware of my feelings and what's happening in the moment during the encounter with the sponsee. And I mentioned that to the sponsee as well. Try to check your feelings, listen to what you're feeling, and be humble and honest as much as you can be with what you're aware of, to encourage awareness on their part as well as on mine. And that way, the four of us, sponsor, sponsee, and each our higher power, there's a connection that's made. And that, to me, is quite essential. And one of the elements that is especially necessary with each sponsee and each encounter is the need for trust. And that is often an issue that I know I had, or I may still have at moments, in regards to myself and my own higher power. I don't have complete trust, and that becomes a roadblock, so to speak. It becomes difficult for us to make that connection. And I've discovered that without the trust, even between sponsor and sponsee, that carries over to my other relationships and the sponsee with his or her relationships, and with higher power as well. If I don't even trust myself, or I don't trust my higher power, how can I be trustful and trustworthy with the others in my life? So as the steps are listed, if you wish, there's a process that's followed. The first three steps are about making that connection with higher power, to develop that relationship with the God of my understanding first. And then I can, in steps 4 to 7, work on the relationship with myself. So I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, to kind of prepare the sponsee to what he may want or choose to work on, and that'll be his choice. And I keep repeating that throughout. It's important as well as a sponsor, because I am also the sponsee with my sponsor. So I kind of have a seat on both sides of that desk. I encourage the sponsee, as I was encouraged by my sponsor at the time, to I need to encourage my sponsee to share, to open up. And one of the things that I use, one of the tools that I use, is to ask questions. I guess being a former teacher, I was always asking questions, so that's kind of carried on with my sponsees. But I also give that permission to the sponsee to develop their own curiosity and to develop that awareness. And by asking questions at any time, they can say, Dan, could you hold a sec? I have something I need to ask. I didn't quite understand. I need to make the sponsee comfortable. And that helps develop the trust. I need to be able to speak, but I also need to be able to listen. Without those two elements necessary, the encounter, there may be difficulties happening, and that can be corrected. But by expressing so and by asking the questions, either from myself or from the sponsee, that's absolutely necessary. And that's kind of established on the first encounter, along with boundaries. I kind of indicate to the sponsee that boundaries is part of the recovery process, obviously, but it is especially important in our meetings when we meet. Now, they used to be in person before the pandemic, and now they're mostly by phone or Skype or Zoom or whatever method we use, virtual method. So it's important that the boundaries be set. And the one boundary that is especially important for me, that was made important by my sponsor at the time, is to be on time, the punctuality. And some kind of react to that, so I let them express what they may think. But I've never really encountered any difficulties with sponsees understanding that principle. If we have a meeting scheduled at 10 o'clock or whatever time it may be, if you can't make it, that's okay, but please let me know. I don't like to be held hostage. And the same thing applies with the sponsee. If I can't make it, I need to let them know. So this mutual interaction where we express our needs, our wants and desires, where we express why we want, why I'm a sponsor, and why they wish a sponsor in their position as a sponsee. That needs to be expressed. And that kind of relieves a lot of the tension, the anxiety. I try to make my sponsee comfortable, but there are boundaries. And because I do have a tendency to elaborate sometimes a little bit too much, I give my sponsee the permission, Dan, whoa, I've got a question for you. So that sponsee needs to feel comfortable. In listening to and reciting the extended serenity prayer, some of the elements that the prayer brings or mentions that we prayed are some of the traits that we find in regards to being emotionally sober. Traits that pertain to recovery, pertain to my recovery, which is part of my message to the sponsees. Okay, you're learning about the steps, you're studying the steps, we're going through that process. But while you're doing that, try to maintain these elements of being emotionally sober. So we made mention of being tolerant and being humble, to be forgiving. If somebody does something we're not happy with and I become powerless, that's okay. Admit it. And maybe forgive the other person. Now, if I've made the mistake, if I've said something inappropriate, the sponsee can tell me, whoa, you've crossed the line there, buddy. And they're allowed to express that boundary. So there's also a question of amends that is part of being emotionally sober. The other one is anonymity, and that's a big one, because whatever we speak about, the two of us, along with our higher powers, stays there. We don't repeat to Tom, Dick, and Harry out there. It remains here. What is said and heard here stays here. That's part of being emotionally sober. And expressing gratitudes is especially important. What else can I mention here? The steps, I try to explain that process to the sponsees, and that comes out with time, but that the steps, the first three steps in particular, are to develop that relationship with the higher power. Without that relationship being rock solid in order to develop the trust. Then I can start working on my relationship with myself in step 4 to 7, the next 4 steps. So that process continues, starting with God, with myself first, and this applies to the sponsee. They need to understand their higher power or their God of their understanding has to come first to develop that trust. And then you develop trust in your own feelings and how you feel or what you may be doing and saying. And then the relationship with others, steps 8, 9, and 10. And then the last 2 steps are to be able to maintain those 3 relationships. So
That's 10 minutes, Dan.
I kind of try to get that across to my sponsees. So is my time up? No. I try to encourage.
Yeah, that is 10 minutes, Dan, but just wrap it up here in another
Yeah, okay. Last point. I try to get my sponsees to check in as often as I can, and that is difficult. So we have scheduled meetings, but if you have something that happens, whether it be a crisis or something, you're having a spiritual awakening and you want to share it, give me a call, let me know, and share that, get it out there. And that is what brings about the healing. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you, Dan. And I apologize. You can hear me now, everybody?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So we actually, a little bit of a logistical glitch here, but I'd like to go to the next slide, David, and actually begin the sharing. Sorry, the introduction. All right. Well, welcome. Welcome. Today, we're continuing the journey in recovery from codependence. In sponsorship, we share and we care. We strive to meet our needs and to understand our thoughts and feelings. Today, there is joy that we are gathered in support of the CoDA World community of codependents, fully engaged in our program of recovery. Let's continue reading the CoDA recovery prayer to guide our time together, And if we could read this in your own language in unison again, please. CoDA recovery prayer. God,
help me to recognize my own feelings, recognize my needs, and love myself.
Love myself just as
I am.
Okay,
Amen.
Thank you, Dan from Canada. Jillian from UK.
Hi.
Hello, Jillian.
It's Jillian, and I'm codependent. And my journey began many years ago as a sponsor. I do believe that I was definitely guided by my higher. This for me is a spiritual program, not a religious one. However, I had some difficulty at first in believing that I could have my very own higher power listen to me and was gentle, loving, kind, non-judgmental, and love me unconditionally 24/7, exactly as I am today. This, I believe, is the essence of my CoDA recovery program and gives me the ability to be a sponsor. Excuse me. I always read the whole of chapter 2 in the Codependence Anonymous Blue Book whenever I feel a little disconnected, and as a result, I'm restored to sanity and I'm reconnected to my higher power or my higher self or inner source. I then feel grounded or earthed, especially in times of crisis when I might feel overwhelmed. And so when I first came to CoDA, I bought all the CoDA Service Conference endorsed literature I could possibly lay my hands on. And of course, I'm also a compulsive book buyer too. I studied the CoDA, Codependence Anonymous Blue Book, and realized that only the first third of the book is a CoDA program, and the other 2/3 are all the wonderful CoDA recovery stories.
Later, I purchased the pocketbook version of the Blue Book and discovered Chapter 5 titled Commonly Asked Questions, which I think should be called All the Answers to You Ever Wanted to Know in CoDA, as it has the wealth of subjects from boundaries to enmeshment, detachment, the spiritual shame spiral, fear of shame, non-physical forms of abuse and control, and much more. I worked through the CoDA Green Book in a step study work group, and then with my sponsor, sharing a weekend retreats and workshops. As I say, going to any lengths to regain recovery, always trusting that my higher power is carrying me in gentle, loving arms. I began to have the confidence to lead step study groups, just as a facilitator at first, and then members began to ask me to be a sponsor for them. I have to admit, I was scared and shocked. How could I be responsible for another person's in CoDA's recovery? Well, the answer is simple. I'm not. I'm not responsible for another person's recovery. They are, together with their own higher power. They have to work their CoDA program. And if I have the privilege of being their sponsor, then I am only their guide. However, do not be despondent if someone you ask says no, like I was at first. They probably already have a full commitment, but the right sponsor will be gifted into your life when your higher power feels you are ready and the time is right. When all this was explained to me by my sponsor, I felt a little more confident about being a sponsor. All I had to do was pass on to my sponsees all that I have been freely given for my time in CoDA. I don't have to be perfect. I'm not a guru. I just have to have the commitment to work this CoDA program and have the love of this wonderful fellowship and the people in it. I'm just a member of Codependence Anonymous and can only share my own experience, strength, and hope for recovery and apply it to my daily life. I use my CoDA 12 steps, and especially steps 1, 2, and 3 every day, and I try to live by the CoDA 12 traditions as part of my life. It's become a life-changing process, together with the CoDA tools of writing, phoning, reading, CoDA service conference endorsed literature, sharing and going to CoDA meetings, joining a step study group, using the CoDA Green Workbook, or using the 30 questions for working steps 1, 2, and 3, and the 40 questions for working steps 4 and 5, either on a one-to-one basis with a sponsee or in a group as their facilitator in a step study group. Also, you can use the Making Choices in Recovery booklet for steps 6 and 7, which is a really good book. We keep in touch, our sponsees and myself, between meetings by creating a WhatsApp group so we can support each other and keep in touch. This is really useful CoDA tool and quite life-affirming. Remember, CoDA is very different from other 12-step recovery programs in that we do not instruct our members on how to work the CoDA program. We are only guides. We do not tell someone we will be their sponsor. The sponsee has to ask whether someone will be their sponsor. A sponsor never gives advice nor instructs a member how they should work their CoDA program. I believe this is an inside-out program, not an outside-in program. We no longer listen to what other people think or say about us or let it affect us. We can now listen to that voice within, in our gut, that tells us when things feel right and also when things feel wrong. We begin to believe in a power greater than ourselves. I call that my higher power. In my meetings, we suggest a newcomer joins a step study group online, or that they keep coming back to a regular meeting to hear different stories from members sharing, and eventually they will find someone they feel they can relate to, possibly with similar life experiences. They do not have to choose a sponsor who has been many years in CoDA, but someone who is actively working their CoDA steps and traditions, and who has a CoDA sponsor and with whom they can honestly share with and who they feel they can trust. I believe the goal is to feel comfortable and at ease with someone who will not judge you and who will love and accept you unconditionally. So what are the gifts of being a sponsor in CoDA? I ask myself, well, I receive love. I feel respect within myself. I feel tremendous humility that a member entrusts me with their story and that I travel their journey with them. It's such a privilege. I feel trusted. It gives me confidence being a sponsor. I learn to let go and let God. I do not have to have all the answers, and I can speak my truth, and it helps me feel closer to my own higher power. And I have a deeper understanding of the CoDA program together with the 12 steps and 12 traditions. I believe to be a good sponsor, I have to be emotionally and actively present and a good listener with a capacity for honesty, with healthy boundaries, and to be kind and supportive, unafraid to ask for clarity when things are unclear. I've also learned to pay attention to my inner child or inner teenager, still a work in progress, really. I often ask my sponsees to also explore this for themselves and possibly to read chapters 2 and 5 of the Codependence Anonymous Blue Book. Also, how I relate to the outside world is affected by my view of the world. I've begun to look outside from a place of being grounded and safe in my relationships. And I believe that the CoDA 12 promises are coming true for me as I give CoDA service and reap the benefits of being a CoDA sponsor. And I'm sure I receive far more from my sponsees than they ever received from me. I've become more confident in speaking out and trusting my gut feelings, my intuitive self. So when I chose a sponsor myself, it had to be somebody I could trust and feel comfortable with. As a codependent, we are creatures of extremes. I certainly am, and we are either all or nothing. So I believe the goal is to reach a healthy balance, something in between. I've learned relationship skills I never had before and a deeper understanding of the CoDA program and the 12 steps and 12 traditions. As a CoDA sponsor, I give examples to my sponsees of my life issues and how I've dealt with them as I turn everything over to my higher power, which is central to my recovery. I do feel that in my last breath on earth, it'll be me and my higher power. So hadn't I better create a good connection with my higher power now? I also pray to my higher power for guidance every day and meditate as best I can, which I pass on to my CoDA sponsees, often reading certain meditation, listening to a beautiful piece of music, or even looking at nature. I sometimes discuss this with my sponsees. I'm always open to new insights. I speak to my sponsees once or twice a week for between 1.5 and 2 hours each time. Keep in touch, thank you, by WhatsApp or by email, and meet up periodically. I also encourage them to have a power of 3 to 5 CoDA members in recovery that they can speak to on a regular basis to support each other, especially when they're in crisis. We also meet up at various weekend CoDA retreats in person and CoDA workshops online. So to conclude, do remember CoDA recovery can be fun, and often we end up laughing with each other. These are some of the amazing gifts of giving service in CoDA, something I never imagined was possible all those years ago when I first came to CoDA broken and exhausted. The only thing I remember from when I first attempted to be a CoDA sponsor was, I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be a perfect sponsor. I can let go and trust by handing everything over to my higher power and using the CoDA tools for recovery. It's another booklet. And having healthy boundaries and communicating clearly with my sponsees and just trust the process. However, if you feel your relationship with your sponsor or sponsee isn't working, then you need to be honest and let go. The right sponsor will present themselves when the time is right. Just trust in the guidance of your higher power. As I finish, can I thank you for giving me the privilege of talking to you about being a sponsor in CoDA. And if you haven't tried being a sponsor before, why not give it a go? You don't know what you're missing.
Hi, my name is Nikki. I'm a recovering codependent. I've been in CoDA for a little over 4 years. I've been sponsoring for about 2 years and have had 4 different sponsees so far. I'm going to lower my hand. Before I began sponsoring, I was terrified. I did not want to do it. I didn't feel ready. I had fears about the commitment and the responsibility. I had fears of getting caught up in my own codependent characteristics, of trying to save, rescue, caretake, give advice. I had a lot of what ifs. What if they don't respect my boundaries? What if they share something and I don't know what to say, or I don't have an answer or a solution to their problem? Sponsoring allowed me to address my fears. In the area of commitment and responsibility, it really helped me to take on more leadership and initiative within my life in general. Because I had always been a backseat leader, willing to speak up and share my opinions with those in charge, but I was afraid of the responsibility piece, so I never wanted to claim that role. After taking on more service positions, I learned how to step up assertively in other areas of my life and was finally willing to take on true leadership roles, which has been very beneficial and has helped me build my confidence in that area. I learned that I didn't need to have all the answers or any of the answers for my sponsees. The fact is, each person has their own answers about their life. My job as a sponsor is simply to listen and offer my own experience, strength, and hope in my individual CoDA journey. If a sponsee asks a question that I don't know the answer to, I just say that. I say I don't know. I'm not my own or other people's higher power. I don't have to pretend like I know everything, because that need to be right is a codependent character defect of mine anyway. Instead, I can have honesty, openness, and integrity, which helps me to build real trust with my sponsees and with people in general, because this is all about real life practice. And usually if I'm really stuck, it's a clue to direct my attention to higher power and remind my sponsee of higher power in that moment as well. Higher power and sponsorship. It's really important for me to invite higher power in to help me with this role of being a sponsor. I ask my higher power for guidance before I get on calls with my sponsees. I pray for higher power's words to speak through me. And I remind myself that this isn't about me and my ego helping someone. It's about me being a vessel for higher power to work through and supporting someone with their own CoDA recovery journey. In order to find a good fit between a sponsor and sponsee, I think it's important to have an interview, whether it's one conversation or several, to see if there is trust and rapport, especially for phone meetings where you are not able to meet people in person or may only hear a 2-minute share from someone every once in a while. As a sponsor, some questions I would ask a potential sponsee are they new to CoDA or 12 steps in general? How long have they been in the program? What are their expectations of a sponsor-sponsee relationship? Have they worked the CoDA 12 steps before with a sponsor? I especially ask this question when the roles are reversed and I, as a sponsee, am looking for a sponsor. I want to know that my sponsor has worked the CoDA steps with a CoDA sponsor personally. And then I usually share what I strive to offer as a sponsor. Not taking it personally on either end if it's not the right fit. Don't force it. I've done that before. And it's so important to have a good fit. And there's so many factors involved. So, yeah, I think it's really tempting to take it personally as a codependent, but it's, as was mentioned, higher power will reveal the right person at the right time. I tell my sponsees that this is all about you, that I'm here to support you in whatever capacity we decide on together. I can share things that I was taught by my sponsor, and I can share my own personal additions in the 12-step process that I've come up with along the way. But if there is something that they want to change, if there's something that doesn't work for them, that they want to do differently, we can discuss that and go from there. I always invite them to make this process their own, because it's really about whatever is going to help them relate and help sustain them in working the steps. Tools that I use to help me sponsor. Boundaries. Boundaries for me are everything in sponsorship on either end, as a sponsor and as a sponsee. Sponsorship is great practice for learning how to set boundaries, but it is also very important for me to have some lined up and communicated ahead of time to make sure my sponsees and I are on the same page going into the agreement. Time boundaries, communication boundaries, meeting structure, etc. And I'll discuss each one of those. Time boundaries, we decide on a time that works for both of us. We meet once a week, say Mondays at 7 for an hour, and we honor that time. I can always assess later once I build trust, whether it works for me to go over that time some weeks. Say there's a lot of content coming up and we go over by 15 minutes or so. But if it allows me to feel safer that we always end on time, then I go with that. I'm looking at sustainability for me as a sponsor so that I don't get burnout in the process. The more secure the boundaries are, the less tempted I am to go over out of my own codependent characteristic trait of people pleasing, and then possibly resent it later when I see how it threw off the rest of my schedule. I learned that the hard way. Communication boundaries. I tell them that if you can't make it, let me know as soon as possible, and I'll do the same. not to let fear or shame get in the way of delaying communication, as I've done many times in the past. And then it's up to the sponsor's discretion whether we try to have a makeup session if the sponsee can't make it. If we decide on a time and my sponsee can't make it repeatedly, it's not my responsibility to continuously find another time that works during the week. Sometimes we'll just have to skip a week, but I usually try to find a time. Time is especially important to me because I had a sponsor that often was a no-show without communication, sometimes for days afterwards. So it's crucial to me to communicate because it demonstrates respect, integrity, and honoring someone's time. I statements. Our meeting is a really great space to practice I statements and for each of us to own our individual experiences and feelings rather than using the general you to deflect that ownership or to try to create relatability. This guideline applies to both me and the sponsee unless we are speaking directly to one another. I encourage this practice because even though it's part of the guidelines in CoDA, it's still really common to be on meetings and hear people speaking in you statements, even from those who have been in the program for years. I also encourage my sponsees to use their relationship with me to practice recovery patterns such as assertive communication, asking for what they want and need, expressing feelings, voicing concerns, setting boundaries, requesting an amends, or making an amends. What I look for in a sponsee is people who are eager to work the steps and are very committed to this work. My sponsee meeting structure is work the steps through the green workbook, the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions workbook of Codependence Anonymous, 1 hour a week, 1 day a week. I'm open to text or calls if they're needing extra support, if I can make it happen, but I can't guarantee I will always be available for that. My meeting format, each meeting has the same format, which I adopted from my sponsor. We start with the CoDA opening prayer, do a brief check-in for 3 to 5 minutes to get current, sometimes longer if they're needing more. The sponsee picks 2 to 3 patterns and characteristics of codependency that they've been noticing in themselves that week and shares how they've been present. If they would like, I can share my experience, strength, and hope for those particular characteristics. We read the step reading out loud together, only when first beginning a new step. We each reflect on that reading. They can ask questions. Then they share their responses to the questions in the workbook as they've completed them. If they would like feedback or experience strength and hope, I can offer that. And we end with a CoDA closing prayer. Now that I'm more comfortable in the role, I have some more flexibility and can share more about like my life and what's relevant with what's going on with what they're sharing and the step in general. But especially when I was just starting out, it was helpful for me to follow these steps because I found that structure helped create safety on both ends and helped me feel more comfortable doing this. This is just my process that works for me. Everyone has their own and can develop their own. Overall, though, sponsorship is easier than it may sound. It's simple for me when following a structure. It's so rewarding. It truly is an honor and a gift to be trusted and included in someone else's recovery journey. It has me working the steps with my sponsee. So whatever step they're on, I'm on, and it keeps me in the recovery conversation. It holds me accountable because if I'm sharing about step work and higher power, it's directing my focus toward the messages of the program. And there have been times, is that time? Okay, thank you. I'm wrapping up. There have been times something has come up and come out of my mouth and I've gone, I need to put that into practice. So it can also be a way to kind of call myself out and keep me balanced. Sponsorship is very important and so necessary, especially in this program. We're needing more sponsors. Even if you don't feel ready, but you have considered it, just do it. I did it before I was ready, and it took almost no time to get the hang of it because higher power has my back, has our back, and yeah, I really recommend it. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you much for sharing. Susan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome. Thank you.
Yes.
Excellent. Hello, I'm Susan. I'm codependent,
and I'm here to share with you today about my experience as a sponsee. What is codependency? What is a CoDA meeting? What are the 12 steps? What does it mean to be a sponsor? What does it mean to be a sponsee? These were some of the questions I had and that maybe you have several years ago when I started with my therapist and started learning about codependency. I had heard the term in the past, but had never looked it up and wasn't clear on what it meant. I certainly didn't realize I was codependent, and it took me a while to accept that in my life. But I cannot say enough about how CoDA meetings and having a sponsor and readings and journaling and different resources I've used have helped me get to a better place on my recovery and healing. It's definitely something I'll keep learning about and keep recovery is ongoing. I'm grateful for what I learned and hope to continue to learn as I recover. When asking about CoDA meetings and the requirement for being a part of CoDA, I was told that it's the desire to have loving and healthy relationships. And this is something that I strive for and that definitely hit me as something important and that I needed help with in my life. And it's, again, something I continue to work on. In my healing process, I have used lots of resources, my sponsor, meetings, journaling, CoDA literature, etc. There's a lot of support out there, and my sponsor's been helpful. But there's one thing that has resonated with me over the past couple of years, and that is that my healing, my feelings, my well-being, my recovery is up to me. Other people can't do it for me. You know, they can provide resources and be supportive, but it's really up to me to get to that place in my life. So having a sponsor has lots of benefits. So one benefit that I see is that it's a relationship of trust, and it's also a person that I can talk to, and I know that they're also codependent and have some of the same struggles that I've had in my life. So I've reached out to other people in my past, but having that sponsor enables me to talk, to know that someone has my back, someone has a listening ear, someone is encouraging, someone who's supporting me, encouraging me to go to meetings. And again, knowing that they understand that struggle. So some of the tendencies for codependency. We have a meeting each week, just a check-in time, and I try to respect that check-in time. So it may be a few minutes, it may be longer, but it's nice knowing that there is a time I can share feelings and ideas or whatever it is I want to share. We also have an understanding where I know if I need to call or contact my sponsor, I can, and that's certainly a benefit. I do try to respect the time that we have set for each week and to honor that, but there have been times when something comes up and I need to call or chat. And again, it's nice to know that listening ear, that support is there on the other side. And something I've learned from having a sponsor in that case is it's okay to ask for help. So I went through a long period in my life where I thought I could handle things and I didn't need to ask for help. And I suppressed my feelings. So again, having that check-in and contacting my sponsor helps me to recognize that, yeah, it is okay. And sometimes I do need help. I do need somebody to listen. And that's been part of my recovery as well. So I remember many things about attending my first meeting. My sponsor's always been welcoming there. And it's very helpful going to the meetings weekly, and we actually have some more than several times a week sometimes. But it's nice to be in that community where you have a group of people sharing feelings and sharing the common struggles. There's also, we have a WhatsApp community as well within that group. And that's been very helpful in my recovery journey. So in my life, I had the tendency to jump in, to want to save people, to offer solutions. I had lots of good answers or next steps, and my tendencies occurred family, friends, and my work, relationships with my kids. It was happening a lot. And so the nature of the meetings and then the relationship I have with my sponsor has helped me in this aspect. For example, talking about the no cross talking in meetings, that's something that I have carried over in my other relationships, because I had the tendency to jump in and again want to offer solutions. Meeting with the sponsor and attending meetings has given me good practice in just sitting, listening, hearing other people without feeling like I had to jump in with the solution. So again, this is something that has been modeled by my sponsor, and something is modeled in meetings, and something that I can carry over into the other relationships that I have in my life. I still also remember hearing the Serenity Prayer at my first meeting and knowing how impactful that was. That's something that I replay in my head a lot as it comes up, as decisions come up in my life, just going over that, reciting that in my head. And I hope that you have found that to be helpful as well. With another benefit of meeting with a sponsor is that person can offer resources to help. So whether that's going to the CoDA website and finding some of the handouts and articles there, some of the videos, my sponsors recommended YouTube videos that might be helpful, etc. So just finding direction on where to find resources has been helpful. My therapist also had recommended, actually at my first visit, some books on boundaries and some books on, one was Codependent No More, that has been very helpful in my recovery. And even though maybe every page and every paragraph didn't apply, I was able to find a lot of things, quotes, paragraphs of things that were very helpful in my recovery as I worked towards my feeling better with my relationships. In our WhatsApp group, we post, or someone posts, daily meditations, and this has been influential to me. So when I hear a quote from the meditation, or when I read that, I try to concentrate on that for the day. So recently, and that meditation is staying in the present moment from the language of letting go, from the Hazelton Betty Ford Foundation. And one of the recent ones that I remember is, I will remember that staying in the present is the best thing that I can do for my future. So my tendencies towards just going over and over about thoughts from the past, or my tendency towards worrying about the future or trying to plan out my future, sometimes got in the way of how I felt. So that quote, staying in the present, has been just one of the many quotes that has helped. So having that daily meditation, I know I'm going to read it every morning, helps to keep me on track with my feelings and thoughts for the day.
Time, Susan.
Okay. And the other, my sponsor also offers lots of quotes that have been helpful in addition to my meditation. So I appreciate all of you listening today. If you're looking for a sponsor or even willing to be a sponsor, I strongly recommend it. And I hope that you will find recovery and healing in the weeks ahead. So thank you for listening.
Thank you for sharing, Susan. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Nathan, UK.
Hi, everyone. Thanks
Hello,
for having
Nathan.
me. My name's Nathan. I'm a codependent, and I'm grateful to be offering my experience, strength, and hope today. Okay, so I got into CoDA I got into recovery when I was 32 after some serious acting out. And I read a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy, and it mentioned something in it about 12 steps. And that was pretty shocking, actually, to read that book and go to a meeting. Then eventually after that, I went to a men's meeting in another process fellowship. And a guy there gave me a book by Pia Melody called Breaking Codependency or something like that. But she does one on love addiction and one on codependency. And I read that. I've got dyslexia, but I read that book I got it on the Friday, and I was finished it on the Sunday. And it was just like a No More Mr. Nice Guy. It was just like, oh, geez, this really is a problem. And I never knew I had this problem. So after I did a couple of other fellowships, I did two other fellowships because I was still stuck in my primary fellowship, and I eventually got down to codependency because even though I'd done the love addiction stuff, I really didn't have any concrete relationship skills. So I went to a local CoDA meeting and got a sponsor that evening in my hometown in the UK. Now, it was relatively apparent from the get-go that that sponsor wasn't suitable, and I probably shouldn't have spent any more than a couple of weeks with him, but I ended up spending 3 months. This was just after lockdown as well, so everyone was in a bit of a tizzy. And eventually, someone on one of the outreach calls I did told me about a thing called the God Box ladder. So what I did was I wrote down a list of what I wanted in a sponsor. And I went really down the line. Got very, very in the weeds of what I wanted. For example, I wanted someone who was male. I wanted someone who was white, who wasn't from my ethnic background. I wanted someone who was available. And I started going to some meetings online in America, and I went to an East Coast meeting. And I found my sponsor, and we began working the steps. And it was literally a brush. When I met this guy, it was like washing up on shore, because the guy I had was basically unrecovered and exceedingly abusive. So what CoDA recovery for me was, it was a series of opportunities, because I already have key problems of codependency or nice guy syndrome as being a doormat, not being able to stand up for yourself. So the first test, if you like, I had was finding a new sponsor and ditching the current sponsor. That was probably the first thing. I didn't even realize that at the time. So I got a sponsor in the US, and by the way, FYI, shout out to American sponsors. They're amazing. They're absolutely amazing. So I started working the steps with him, and we did the 30 questions, and it was a very sort of 30 questions are steps 1 to 3. And it was very, very much having all this stuff come into your life and all these opportunities. And the big thing for me was intimate relationships. And I had a lot of opportunities with women I was attracted to, but I didn't have the tools or the wherewithal to embrace. Also, people from your past come in. It was very, very weird. Like this woman I went to school with, she came back into my life and I was just, limerently in love with her. It was weird. I went to a library to go and work on a book, and I just ran into her and I was like, oh, this is higher power, and this is I'm supposed to be with this woman. But we went on a date. We went for, let's be honest, we went for coffee and it didn't work out. And she came back into my life when I was doing step 4 again. I'll come back to that in a minute. But she was the catalyst for me to bring up all these issues, for all these issues to come out. And that's how your higher power, or whatever the way this program works, will pull all these issues out. So then as I did that, I did the 30 questions and started my 40 questions, my step 4. And then as I started that process, things started to fall out of my life rapidly. Things were being pulled out rapidly. Like what really got me into CoDA initially was I was attracted to this woman at dance, and I just couldn't, she was giving me the signs she was available, but I couldn't do anything about it. So she got bored and went and danced with someone else, and that had been a pattern in my life. So I wanted to do something about it. And one by one, all these things that I thought were really important, like friends, relationships, going to dancing, one by one, these things were all taken out of my life. All taken out of my life. Until what was left was what was really important. So as I worked the steps, I picked up a lot of tools along the way. Boundaries, how to actually talk to women in an effective way. That was one of the first things I got. Things like journaling, things like outreach, meditation, prayer. And actually, the main one was real boundaries and how to talk to people, which I never had. I never knew the difference between, I knew physical and sexual. That's what I knew in terms of boundaries. I didn't know emotional. I didn't know intellectual. So an intellectual boundary is if your politics and my politics differ. That would be an intellectual boundary. I didn't even know that existed. Didn't have a clue, and as I worked through the questions, the 40 questions, I got tool after tool after tool. And after those 30 and 40 questions, I have a toolkit now to be able to navigate life. God box letters was another one. Okay. And now when you go into CoDA, the needy nice guys always tend to hang around women, and probably the needy nice girls tend to hang around guys, I suppose. And for me, I was preparing in my head to build relationships with men. So I was kind of already, before I got into CoDA, I was already, but that's not what happened. And I found a outreach partner called M, let's just call her that. And this person loved me like no one else loved me, this woman who I'd never met before. And we've just spoken on the phone. And she actually helped me to model a healthy relationship with a woman, what that actually looks like. And it's incredible because guys have this thing of you can't cry in front of a woman, you can't express anything that's going to make her upset, you can't, there's a lot of things you can't do. And so it makes you less, you're less brave, you're less willing to take a risk. And this outreach relationship I had with this woman was just one of the strongest relationships I've had with a woman in my life. Thank you. And bringing back to that girl that came up in the first 30 questions, she came back into my life. And I kind of got the feeling that she was attracted to me, but I ended up screwing it up. And I went into a complete shame spiral, crying every day, just couldn't get out of bed. And I would call this woman and she would literally hold my hand through, she obviously was in a different country. And it was the most loved I've been from a woman who isn't a family member in my life. So you have to do a little bit of a work, guys, but it is out there. And it did teach me that you don't have to build these walls between men and women. Yeah, that's total crap by the media, on my French. That's total rubbish. But you can actually have a connection with women on a deep level, and it can be not sexual. And it doesn't mean you're a nice guy, or it doesn't mean that you're a doormat. It means you're a human being. That was amazing. That was the most amazing thing probably I've ever experienced in my life. So as so all these tools have helped me to build build successful relationships. One for me is that if someone doesn't get back to me, then I go crazy. Like if I say, hey, are we going to meet for coffee on Monday and we're meeting on Friday and you don't get back to me till Friday afternoon, I go mad and start going out my head. So using the God box letters and things like that have helped me to manage those relationships and helped me to manage myself. I spent my first 40 years of life without anything like that to be able to mitigate those, because I was a kid with mental disabilities, and in my family, unfortunately, in the background I come from, they kind of push those guys out because they're seen as a burden, so they're left to sort of. Cheers. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And let me just wrap up on this. So basically, the future looks like for me is that people aren't as scary as they once were. I'm able to go out there and build relationships and be part of a community. And the final frontier for me is to be able to go and date. And I would say for anyone's having issues with intimate relationships, with personal relationships, any relationship, this place is a one-stop shop. And the sponsor-sponsee relationship is absolutely crucial to enable recovery from codependence. Thank you so much for hearing me.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you so much for sharing today. Thank you. Carol? Is Carol muted?
Yes, if you raise your hand, Carol, we can unmute you. Can help you with that.
Okay, there she is. And if you can unmute them.
Hello?
Oh,
Can you
hello,
hear me?
Carol. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, lovely. Okay. So my name is Carol, and I'm a recovering codependent. I was the fifth of 6 children, the second to my parents jointly. My parents came from the Caribbean to England, like many others in the 1960s, to make a better life. They were honest and hard-working people, and I now believe they did the best they could to support me. At 3 months old, I was left with a childminder every day, and then returned home late each night to a physically caring but emotionally unavailable mother, while my parents worked to buy our first home. I think this was the start of my codependency, emotional disconnection, feeling remote and lost. From the outside, we appeared to be a good family. Our home was clean and well organised. We were given regular meals, physical care, and fully supported in education. My parents valued education because they were aware that this opportunity was only given to the wealthy in the Caribbean. I was an easygoing, gentle child, quite sensitive, and recognised by my family as wanting to make everyone happy. From an early age, I was aware that my mother was in pain. I remember being with her, age 9, when she was told that my eldest sister would not be allowed to come to the UK. She had to remain with my grandmother in the Caribbean because of changes to the UK immigration laws. I can still remember the depth of her painful cry. I felt very sad and guilty. My mother was completely unaware of the pain I experienced. In that situation, I think I concluded that I didn't exist, and even if I did, then I wasn't meant to or allowed to have feelings, and so it went on. My parents had only a few family members in London. They struggled to parent me with limited financial, practical and emotional support. They were outsiders. They had to deal with racism, homesickness, and the culture of moving from the warmth and connection of home to the cold and isolation of England. They did receive support from fellow travellers and the church, but this could not replace the depth of family support. My father was an intelligent, kind, loving and spiritual man who provided consistent emotional safety. He was a new man back in the 1960s, becoming readily involved in all areas of family life, and he loved us dearly. My mother loves me in the only way she can. However, I now believe she's a raging narcissist. My mother's moods dominated our household. Sadness, weeping, anger, shouting, raging, sulking, withdrawing. I think I responded by shutting down, dissociating, being watchful, wanting to make her happy, protecting and defending her, reasoning with her, defending others against her, becoming involved in her drama to get close to her, being quiet, laying low, obsessing angrily about her and wanting to fix her. I witnessed my parents arguing and on some occasions physically fighting. My mother struggled to regulate her emotions. Being around her was like being in a war zone, daily under fire from verbal and on occasions physical abuse. Emotionally, it was like living with a constantly threatening or erupting volcano. Both my parents were codependent, looking to other people to validate them through their good deeds. They constantly talked about other people and their problems, sometimes disclosing distressing adult information without any issues, without sensitivity to my young mind. I left home aged 20 with no sense of self, a low self-esteem, striving, compliant, very anxious, smiling on the outside and very sad and confused on the inside. I coped academically at university, but entered relationships wanting others to validate and see me. I engaged in many toxic relationships which further undermined my self-esteem. I pursued romantic relationships relentlessly, unaware that I craved being special, fixed, or made whole. In 2016, I ended my 20-year relationship with my co-parent. I was done trying to fix others. I'd failed. Perhaps I could try to get help for myself. I read a book about narcissistic mothers which mentioned codependency. I could instantly recognize myself as having 99% of the characteristics, intellectually, but I struggled to connect with them in my daily life. When I attended my first CoDA meeting, I was so angry and in pain and wrapped up in others, it was hard to understand myself. I only existed in my reaction to others. I felt invisible. I was in CoDA for 3 years before I had the courage to ask for a sponsor after attending a workshop given by Ken and Mary, the founders of CoDA, in 2019. I cried continuously, like the tears were from behind my eyes. I believe now that the connection I made with my higher power during the conference allowed my little girl who'd been locked away the permission and safety to be seen and heard. I'm eternally grateful to my sponsor for restoring my trust and hope. It is hard for me to convey in words how hard it was for me to trust and believe that I had any real value to restore. I've met with my sponsor twice weekly since 2019, and we're currently working on step 9, We go at a pace that is manageable with my life and my mood. And we've used both the questions and the green workbook. So how sponsorships help me? She's helped me to understand and to continue to develop a loving and kind personal higher power, which is absolutely crucial to have on this sometimes extremely difficult and painful journey. She's helped me to gain a deeper understanding of what working the program means, using prayer, meditation, writing, meetings, reading chapter 2 in the Blue Book to reconnect and ground when I'm feeling distressed. She's helped me to understand the emotional abuse I experienced and continue to experience, to be honest with you, using pages 118 to 120 in the Blue Book. It has validated my experiences. She helped me to overcome my fear of step 4, which I viewed as a further potential for criticism and shame. Instead, to view my inventory as crucial self-understanding to support my ability to become accountable for my participation in unhealthy relationships. I can now better recognize unhealthy behaviors of others and myself and set boundaries and practice healthy behaviors. I understand I can't afford resentment, so I strive to behave in healthier ways on a daily basis. She has listened patiently as I process the grief, hurt and confusion from past and current relationship. She has shared her struggles and insights on her recovery journey, providing fellowship and encouragement to take it one day at a time, baby steps, reminding me that I should be willing and not perfect. She has helped me let go of my rage at the need to forgive harmful and abusive others in step 8. Instead, gently helping me to understand the true meaning of amends and that my focus initially needs to be on the harm that I've done in my relationship to my higher power and myself. She has helped me to reflect on current family and work problems and begin to speak my truth in calm and direct ways, which has significantly improved my relationships and consequently my mental health and self-esteem. She has helped me to connect to my inner children and explore ways to calm and reassure them when they are feeling sad, terrified, paralyzed with anxiety and apathetic. She has given me the most consistent emotional support and encouragement that I have had in my life, and I am deeply grateful. I now feel that I am not alone, and I am truly grateful that she has really helped me to come away from being so remote to connected and working on my recovery every day I pass.
Oh, thank you so much, Carol. Thank you for sharing. And David, if you go to the back to the slide, in a moment we're going to have Michael W. from Australasia present the first 14 days. But since we completed these 6 speakers, I wanted to encourage you to go to the CoDA.org website. We have story gathers. We have sponsorship amongst teens called CoDA Teen. If you have a sponsorship story, contact literature. We now have a literature tab on the website. So if you go to the CoDA.org website, you will see a literature tab. Please feel free to submit your story, and we're going to share. And I think down the road, we'll possibly have a new collection called Sponsorship Stories. So thank you. Thank you for those of you shared. And what we're going to do at this point is go to Michael W., who has a presentation on Australia's first 14 days. Michael?
Right. Thank you, Jay. Hi, I'm Michael.
You can share screen.
Thank you for the opportunity to present the first 14 days today. I'll just screen share. My talk today is based on discussions I've had with a couple of members in our fellowship and also based on my own experience. So history to the first 14 days. The program was created in 2001 by Jan W. in Sydney. At the time the program was created, Jan had already been in fellowship for about 15 years. There were 2 main intentions that drove the first 14 days program development. First one, changing the consciousness of sponsees when they came into the fellowship. Jan developed the program and applied it over a 14-day time frame, and hence the name. She would then move on to step 1 with her sponsees. Use of the program started spreading to other groups in Australia and was ultimately adopted by CoDA Australasia Intergroup. The second intention was boosting the pool of sponsors. Prior to the first 14 days, there were few members working the 12 steps due to a lack of sponsors. In the early days of the fellowship in Australia, members lacked confidence in becoming a 12-step sponsor. A strategy was needed to boost recovery down under. Anyone who has finished the first 14 days can take someone else through the program. There is no requirement to have finished the 12 steps in order to sponsor the first 14 days. This is because we don't give feedback. The first 14 days is a self-reflection done in relationship with someone. Just filling out the answers yourself would be doing the work in isolation. After the first 14-day program was implemented, there was a noticeable takeoff in CoDA recovery in Australia. The rationale was that at the end of the first 14 days program, having experienced the gift of service through sponsorship, the new sponsor might be motivated to consider a sponsorship role in the 12 steps, perhaps sponsoring steps 1, 2, and 3 just for a start. And these intentions became my lived experience. It was a game changer for me and a gentle on-ramp to my recovery journey. Setting expectations. Our sponsorship coordinator sends this email at the time of pairing sponsor and sponsee. And the email outlines the responsibilities for both parties. Pairing can be organised in particular groups, but it's important to remember to set expectations around the program and how it works. That writing may be a little bit small for some people to read on their screens, so that's the email that is sent out at the time of pairing, and I'll read it for you now. The email reads, I am happy to say that I have found someone good to take you through the first 14 days. His name is Michael W., and he's CC'd on this email. Michael W. will simply send you one question at a time, starting from day 1, and you email your answers back to him within a day or so. He will not give a lot of feedback, usually just a thank you for your answers, a little like a meeting. All you need to answer the questions are contained in the workbook that is attached as a PDF. Just do your best and know that there are no right answers. Aim to get through the process within 3 to 4 weeks and respect the time that your temporary sponsor is taking to help you through this process. It is tempting to let this work go, as there can be a lot going on for us. It's important to remember that our step work is our way out of pain. If there are long gaps, we may need to find someone else to finish the process with you. Once you have finished, we will arrange for you to take someone else through the first 14 days, and if you want, find you a co-sponsor to start work on the steps. Remember, through this period, it's important to get to meetings regularly. 2 a week is a good idea. If you feel you are not ready at the moment, please send me a note so that Michael W. can work with another member. Any questions, feel free to get back to me. Michael W. is now waiting for you to make contact with him and for you to tell him a little about yourself. Congratulations on taking this step for yourself and your recovery. Implementation of the program. The workbook and the questions for sponsors are 2 separate documents. And at the end of this presentation, there's information on how to get them. They're free and they're available for download from CoDA Australia's website. But in the workbook for sponsees, I would say that the implementations on page 2 are outdated. Bear in mind, this document stretches back nearly 23 years now, and in the early days it was implemented over the phone, and it's now recommended to be done via email. It's currently recommended that it's done by email. Early CoDA members can be very needy and project their issues onto the sponsor, who may be unable to hold that space for them. So email is a cleaner way to do that. It's designed to be a program of self-reflection done in relationship, and the sponsor sends the question for day 1 from their question sheet, and then the answer to day 1 is returned and sent to the sponsor. The sponsor responds with a simple "thank you for your answer," and then sends the next question. There is scope to make some comments to clarify and encourage the sponsee, but we're very mindful not to engage in crosstalk. The process of question and answer continues through to day 14. Responses can vary in length from a few sentences, and some sponsees write multiple pages. There is scope for the sponsor to touch base in at around day 6 or day 7 via phone, just to see how the sponsee is going. The sponsor's role in this program is quite simple. It's simply to take the sponsee through the first 14 days. The sponsor is not a therapist, nor are they a friend, and further support is available through the fellowship and at meetings. Now, the next 2 slides are just a rundown of what's in each of the 14 days. I'll read that out for those who may not be able to see that. So day 1, we contemplate the wording of the CoDA preamble and the welcome. Day 2, we reflect on isolation as being part of codependent behaviour and the possibility of 12-step recovery being a return from isolation. Day 3, patterns and characteristics of codependency with some specific examples. Day 4 is more work on the characteristics of codependency. Day 5 is more or less step 1, or at least has a lot of content from step 1. Day 6 is an introduction to boundaries. Day 7, patterns of codependency and their effects on you and your relationships. Day 8 is a list of affirmations and how those might be used in recovery. Day 9 explores shame. Day 10, controlling behaviours and avoiding behaviours. Day 11, taking care of ourselves. Day 12, enmeshment, detachment and avoidance. Day 13, self-parenting. And then day 14 rounds up the work by developing what was called 5 bottom line behaviours and situations that might trigger our codependency. And then that forms the basis of an ongoing review as a step into the 12 steps. Boundaries within the first 14 days. It's important to keep the momentum. After a week without contact, the sponsor needs to contact the sponsee just to check on them. After another week, if there's no contact, it's recommended to bring the relationship to a close. The boundary needs to be maintained. If the sponsee isn't ready at this stage, then let them know that it's time to stop the program, and let the sponsee know that they can approach you to carry on when they are ready. Meeting attendance. Essentially, we don't do the first 14 days with somebody who's stopped going to regular CoDA meetings. Otherwise, the sponsee is taking you on as their therapist. Ongoing meeting attendance is an important component of the first 14 days. No crosstalk. As I said, there's very simple responses given by the sponsor, which makes it easier to be a sponsor in the program. And they're along the lines of, I can relate to your response. I can resonate with the issues that you've raised. Great work. You're displaying a lot of insight and honesty. And of course, it's also appropriate to help clarify some of the content for the sponsee if they're struggling and to understand what's being asked of them. Without these boundaries, the sponsee's unmanageability is being enabled, and they may have the idea that, well, the rules don't apply to me. Sponsees need to experience the result of their behaviours rather than being able to run the program by their own rules. Benefits of the first 14 days. It leads to a change in consciousness in early recovery for sponsees. It makes recovery more approachable, and it's generally accepted as being less intimidating than step work. It gets sponsees used to doing regular work. It introduces personal accountability for recovery. It rapidly brings people out of denial and may be a first introduction to somebody who has boundaries, which is the sponsor. Sponsees learn to implement simple steps and tools of recovery in their daily life. It can also act as a vetting process for people leading into the 12 steps. Some people aren't ready for recovery. Feedback that we get from the program. Sponsors and sponsees are generally enthusiastic about the program, and they say that it's an excellent introduction and really cements their awareness of their codependency. It also seems to be less intimidating than the steps. And our sponsorship coordinator gets a lot more people wanting to do the first 14 days than the 12 steps, as they feel that it's something they can achieve that isn't the whole 12 steps. And I've asterisked there that some sponsees might come into the fellowship looking for more from their sponsor. They may be wanting a relationship or wanting to enmesh with somebody just simply through not understanding their own codependency. Updates. There's certainly room for updates, especially around the stated guidelines for implementation of the program. And the most recent imprint that we have available for download is version 1.6, which was completed in December 2015. And a brief word on copyright and endorsement. The first 14 days hasn't been through the conference endorsement process with CoDA World. CoDA Australasia Intergroup has approved use of the program in Australia. And we do have a copyright agreement with CoDA World for the material that's in the first 14 days. Any CoDA group is welcome to use the first 14 days, but if you're doing so, please make sure that you have an agreement of your own with CoDA World for use of copyrighted material. And CoDA Australasia Intergroup is yet to discuss seeking endorsement. Some contacts. So that's the first line there, codependenceanonymous.org.au is the web address for our webpage. And on there, there's a tab to buy literature, and you can go into that and select digital content, and that's where you'll find both the questions and the workbook. And as I say, there are two separate documents that are available free for download. But you do need to put them in your basket and go through the checkout, but there's a $0 amount. And as I said, I'm Michael W., and I'm in the service role of Literature Officer for CoDA Australasia. And that's the email address. If you'd like to contact me, I'm happy to share this transcript or these slides. Thank you for listening to the talk.
Thank you, Michael. And then we have the next slide, David. Okay, and Michael, you want to discuss this slide, please? Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. And well done, David, on the QR codes. Yeah, so there's the two separate listings there. The first 14 days workbook, which contains the resource material for the sponsee, and then the first 14 days questions, which is for the sponsor.
Sorry, well, Michael, thank you so much for that share and the talk. I did not include those email, unfortunately, on the slide. I forgot to include the email links. If you could put those in the chat, that would be appreciated. And a reminder that you do need to go through the checkout process. There is no charge for these documents. So you can't buy anything from CoDA Australia, unfortunately, because they do not ship, at least to the United States. But you can get anything they offer that is no charge as a download.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Michael. And at this point, we have a couple technical issues we want to take care of. So we're going to take a break, and that would be 15 minutes. So take a break, and we'll be back in 15 minutes. Thank you so much. Thanks for your patience. Progress, not perfection.